legends, I hope you're all fantastic. It is time for another Q&A video. A massive thank you to everybody who submitted a question for this week's Q&A. It has been a little while since we've done one, so if you've got a question for the next Q&A video, please let me know in the comments section below. I want to give a massive shout out to all the amazing people who support me over on Patreon. If you like what I do on my channel and you want to help support it directly, there's a link to the Patreon in the video description. You can also check out some of the music that I make with my band Ragdoll if you like what I do here. For now, let's dive into your questions. First up, we've got a question from Dolfinado, the guitars that got away. Are there any guitars that I regret selling or not buying? And a couple come to mind. One that more recently I've been thinking about because I actually used this guitar a lot on the Ragdoll All I Want EP, particularly the track Break You, which is one of my favorite Ragdoll tunes. It's a Fender Jeff Beck Strat that belonged to a friend of mine. They let me borrow the guitar basically for an indefinite amount of time, and then they moved overseas and they said, hey, I'm going to sell the guitar. If you want to buy it, I'll hook you up. Otherwise, do you want to list it on Marketplace? And basically just transfer me the cash. And I thought I should buy this guitar. I've used it on a bunch of recordings. I love the way it plays. I love the way it sounds. And for whatever reason, I decided to pass on it. I ended up selling the guitar on their behalf. Someone bought it for a really good price and they were super stoked when they got it. And I think about that guitar quite often. It was this awesome green finish. It just had that undefinable thing that some Strats have. So that's one I think of. Another one is a PRS SC250 that I saw, I want to say in 2014, the same year that I bought my 245. It was this beautiful cherry color with a quilt top. It was in Guitar Center, Hollywood, and I want to say it was maybe $1,500 US. And at the time, the Australian dollar was around parity, which is insane for a USA-made PRS, especially thinking about it now. And it was one of those things where I played the guitar, it played great, it sounded great, and I thought, you know what? I think I'm going to pass on this one. And basically, as soon as I did that, I regretted it. The other one is way back in 2008 when I bought my Hamer Standard. There was a Hamer Junior from the same batch, beautiful Carina finish. I think it was, again, maybe 1,600, 1,700 Australian dollars. I had the money at the time and I decided not to grab it. Now those guitars are worth quite a bit more, and the juniors are just cool. You know, single dog ear P90 in there. It would have been really cool sort of to have the set, having the standard and having the junior together. They were the same year, very close production numbers on there. So they're the three that come to mind. And I know I'm not the only person who has guitar regrets out there. So please, in the comments section, let me know about the guitars that got away for you. Here is the giant chungus that is my 2008 Hamer Standard. You can kind of see that figured limber in there as well. And yeah, fun fact, Carina apparently refers to this finish, and limber is actually the name for the species of timber. Couple of questions about this guitar and Hamers in general. How much does this guitar weigh? I was actually quite surprised when I weighed this just before. My heaviest guitar is my 1990 Les Paul Custom, which comes in just under 5 kilos, so around 11 pounds in freedom units. I think it's 4.8 kilos. This is 4.4 kilos. So what did I do? I wrote that down somewhere. I think that's around maybe just under 10 pounds if we use them freedom units again. So this is a chungus, but because it's so big and the mass is distributed over a wider area, it definitely hangs different to the Les Paul Custom. I actually find both guitars pretty comfortable to play live. In contrast to that, my Chilia Bella Aurora, which I've been playing live a lot, only weighs 2.8 kilos. So that's around 6.7 pounds. And I mean, there's a good reason why I feel pretty good after doing a long gig on that guitar. Now, the next question related to this guitar comes from friend of the channel, Matthew Venuti. Is it worth getting your dream guitar, the Hamer Standard? Like, is this really that different to a Gibson Explorer? I think if you could come around and play this and then play a modern production Gibson Explorer side by side, blindfolded, they are different enough where you'd obviously clock the body shape, right? But just the way the neck feels, the way the fingerboard edges feel, the overall fit and finish on everything on this guitar. Not saying that Explorers are bad, because Explorers are awesome. I would happily go out and play an Explorer any day of the week. But this just has that extra 3 to 5% of something, in my opinion. And it's one of those things, man, you don't want to die wondering when it comes to your dream guitars compared to other luxury goods out there like cars or watches or bottles of wine. Guitars are pretty reasonably priced, really, especially the desirable vintage ones. So I am all in on you tracking down a Hamer Standard. I think the ones from the later production years, like 2005 to 2010, all the way up to the point where they closed down USA production, they're still incredible guitars. Obviously, a 4-digit standard is now, basically blue chip when it comes to guitars. They are so desirable, but they're so expensive. So few of them were made. And that was a little golden era, the beginning of the boutique era with those. But yeah, when I play this guitar, like, I'm quite sentimentally attached to it and the way it looks. And also being tall, it looks to scale on there. But again, I think you're in one of those situations, Matt, where, you're probably just going to do it. Let's all make Matt get a Hamer Standard. On the topic of Hamer, do I think Hamer would be viable if they restarted US production? Ooh, this is an interesting question because there's been a bunch of, let's say, legacy adjacent brands that have recently come back. I think of something like Robin Guitars relaunching, making guitars in the USA. The thing that would make me very skeptical of that is how much of the original team would be included, because you've got someone like Mike Shishkov, who was a builder at Hamer, who went on to do Shishkov guitars, and you can check out the website. They look absolutely incredible, very much a continuation of that Hamer legacy. Are you going to bring in people like that, or is it simply just going to be a cynical rebranding of something where, sure, you make the guitars in the USA, but they're just pumped out, you put the same badge on them, and it's Hamer Guitars cosplay rather than, being a real Hamer? So I would say there's probably a reason the brand hasn't been relaunched. I know Joel Danzig is also doing some building and doing his own thing, continuing on what he's been doing for decades and decades. Joel is someone I would really like to get on the podcast, actually, and talk about just his history in the guitar industry. But I digress. It would be interesting if Hamer did come back and they sort of relaunched US production, but they did a Californian, because they haven't made a US Californian for years and years, even up to the point where they closed down. They would have to do a standard and probably a Vector. It's all a question of what models do you bring back? Do you really go for that kind of 80s nostalgia crowd that is big at the moment? And I guess maybe 15 years ago, you had a bit of 70s nostalgia happening that helped the brand tick along with the more vintage-inspired guitars like the Artist and obviously these Corina Standards and the Juniors. It's interesting to think about. I'd love to know your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below if there's anybody a little bit more experienced in the world of modern manufacturing, particularly manufacturing in the USA and particularly instrument manufacturing. Like, would that even be feasible? The next question comes from Heavy Brettle. Brett, do I still get a rush when I'm creating if I come up with a new riff and I start fleshing it out and writing and delving into that process? Absolutely, man. That is still one of the reasons that I absolutely love music and love guitar. I'm convinced that as human beings, one thing that we're always chasing is that flow state that we get, say, when we come up with a new riff, or if we're doing a task that really engages us, or we're singing our favorite song in the shower or cooking a meal where it feels like time just happens and all the wonderful things start flowing out of you. It's almost like you get disconnected a little bit from your body. That's certainly the thing that I'm chasing when I'm playing music, whether it's writing music or whether it's playing live. And in particular, that very awesome feeling, the shivers you feel down your spine sometimes when you're really in the moment playing a guitar solo, grabbing a big emotional bend or something like that, and everything just comes together just right. It's one of the things that really makes life worth living, and I'm sure everybody watching this has experienced that at least once or twice in their life, and it's got them hooked on guitar, music, and I guess just life in general. Gear-related questions now. What do I use for an FRFR live when I need to hear myself through my Fractal? I've been using the Red Sound MF10s for the last couple of years. Most gigs that I do, I'm super lazy, and I'll make sure that I get the tech specs from the venue first. And if they have in-house monitors, I'll just use that. And, that's been totally fine. Sometimes it's not about getting the greatest guitar sound out of your wedge live. It's about having enough to know where your guitar fits into that sonic picture and to just go out and perform and really enjoy yourself. For the club cabaret gigs, because they're usually long seasons of 30 plus shows and they've got an in-house sound tech, you get a really nice lead into the production with tech rehearsals and sound checks where you can really get that stuff dialed in. And I'm more often than not very happy with the monitoring solutions that I've had there. For Ragdoll stuff, like recently we played a show in Melbourne where there were some really tiny but super loud monitors on stage, and the stage was just incredibly loud. Like, I haven't been on a stage that loud in a long time, where you go, you know what? I can't even tell the difference between the guitar sound and just getting hit on the head, but that's kind of fun as well. On the topic of FRFRs, have I tried the Laney FRFRs? I haven't personally used them live. One of my students has one, and we haven't had a chance to fully crank it up, but it sounds pretty decent. I think, like any FRFR solution, it's really going to depend on what you're putting into it and also what you expect out of it. Do you just want something that is going to be relatively consistent and loud and get you a good enough guitar tone to use live, or are you chasing something that's basically going to recreate the experience of, say, a mic'd cab through some really nice studio monitors? There's a pretty big spectrum on there. And on that topic of what you put into the FRFR, when it comes to using the Axe or the AM4 Live, I've been using the AM4 Live a lot recently. What do I do with my high and low cuts? Do I leave them wide open so that front of house has the maximum amount of information to work with, or do I add some cuts? What I've found is, the usual 60 to 80 hertz low cut works really well. I've been doing that forever and haven't really found a need to change that. But I've been bringing the high cut down a lot. And I think this is because, again, if you're in a situation where you're lucky enough to have your own monitor engineer, they're not just the monitor engineer for you. They're doing guitar, bass, drums, all the other instruments for everybody. And you don't want to take up too much of their time. And a lot of the time saying, hey, can you pull out a bit of 3.3K and 5.5K, but still give me a nice, roll off around 8K, that just becomes a pain in the backside. So I've actually been using a high cut around 5K. 5.5K. And a big shout out to my buddy Angus Clark, who we had on the Gear podcast a little while ago. Angus was saying, doing the Trans-Siberian Orchestra gigs and playing incredibly loud in arenas, that 5K cut on the guitars just makes them sound really fat. There's enough information left in there for front of house to work with. You're not running the risk of ripping everybody's faces off with the sound of like a close mic'd 57 or something like that. I think if you've got a good relationship with your sound engineer and you trust them, then you can get away with leaving things a lot more wide open. But I just find it's a little bit easier to just have the guitar sound in a can and say, hey, rip off the lid, put it through front of house, do what you want with it. As long as my monitor isn't absolutely killing me, I'll be fine. Do I know what John Sykes was using on the 1987 album to get some width and chorusing? I haven't seen a definitive answer for that. Everybody sort of knows by now that John was using a stereo pair of the Boogie Mark III Colosseums. There was obviously the Black Les Paul Custom on there, his 60s Strat. There was definitely a custom Charvel with a locking trem system on there, which I didn't realize for ages. I just thought all those whammy dives and things like that, where John was so good that he could get away with doing pinch harmonic pre-bends on stuff and just making it work. But yeah, obviously there's a bunch of different guitars going down on that record. I did see that he was using a PCM 41 at one stage, and that's very era appropriate for a popular trick at the time where you'd use like a wet dry setup with the PCM 41. You'd use a very short delay, I'm guessing somewhere between 5 and 20 milliseconds, maybe some modulation on that delay from the PCM 41, maybe a bit of saturation from its preamp as well. And then you send the direct out to your other amp. So you've got this basically what they'd call the Haas effect happening, but with your amps. I saw an interview on the Session Solos channel recently, which is an awesome channel. Definitely go and check it out. So many great interviews on there with Doug Aldrich, where Doug was talking about, the first time he heard a massive guitar sound live when he moved to LA, someone was using a PCM 41 to split the signal. So I wouldn't be surprised if 1987 is the PCM41 going between the two amps, but then they've added a bunch of grease in post. I think if you wanted to cop that sound, probably the easiest way to do it is set up a big chunky Mark series tone and then just add some micro pitch or like a dimension chorus after the cab block on there to get that extra width and girth going on. That's basically what I do when I do the Whitesnake tribute gigs, and it's close enough for rock and roll. What's my favorite guitar and amp combination? No pedals allowed. This one comes from Colin. Colin, I'm a simple man. It's a Les Paul into a Marshall. It's just good. It's just the thing where if I couldn't have anything else and I could just kind of sound like the Young Brothers, that would be enough for me. My 1990 Les Paul Custom, straight into the front of some type of cranked up Plexi or JCM 800 through a greenback cab. That's going to do enough. I think everything else in the guitar universe is basically gravy on top of that. And I certainly like all the extra gravy with boosts and modulation effects and octavers, filters, detunes, reverbs, delays. But I think fundamentally for me, the way I grew up playing, it comes back to that Les Paul and Marshall template. But having said that, if I could only choose between a Les Paul and a Strat to play for the rest of time, I'd probably choose an HSS Strat because, look, humbucker in the bridge, that is just a glorious thing. But one thing that I kind of need in my life is that fat Strat neck pickup tone. And I think the HSS Strat, certainly for rock music, has to be one of the most versatile combinations that you can use. But as I'm saying this, I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe it's neither of them. Maybe it's a semi-hollow like a 335 or my Chilia Bella Aurora. A couple of questions related to favorites. Who would I say is my favorite rock band? The two that come to mind would have to be King's X and Rush. Maybe throw some Whitesnake in there because we were talking about John Sykes. But when it comes to bands that I think I could listen to basically every day or every other day, it's going to be one of King's X or Rush. It's the trio. Ty and Alex both have such a unique guitar sound. They're so creative with their parts, and the music that they've made has spanned multiple genres and eras. And look, if you want to know how to play rock music, go and watch a Rush live concert or go and watch King's X. I think it's on the Jon Stewart show where they're playing Dogman. That's how you play rock music, kids. That's how you get it done. My favorite guitar to play live or in the studio. Live, it's been my Chilia Bella Aurora for the last couple of years. That thing just does everything that I want. It's light, it looks cool, it sounds amazing. You can get great clean sounds out of it. You can get absolutely crushing distorted sounds out of it. It sustains like a bell, and it's just so easy and effortless to play. Charles really does make amazing stuff. In the studio, I love playing that as well as my 1990 Les Paul Custom. This Hamer is a whole lot of fun to play when I pull it out. My Sir Modern, the Chilia Renegade, a bunch of my Strats. That's the beauty of the studio, is all you have to do is put one guitar down and pick another one up. I actually recently did a video about all my favorite guitars, and then I did another video following up on that of like the honorable mentions that didn't make it into the first video. So make sure you go and check that one out if you want to see and hear some of those amazing instruments. What about my favorite Ragdoll riff, solo, or song to play? I'll answer that one in the reverse order to what I just listed it in. I think my favorite song to play, especially live, is Rust. That one just goes so hard. It's so fun to play with all the little feel and groove changes in it. It's got a breakdown. It's got one of my favorite solos that I've ever put to tape on there, and it just gets a great reaction from the crowd. We basically close our set now with that one, and it pretty much always goes off. In terms of songs, this is a tough one because it's always like the newest thing that we've done, but I think it would have to be Shine. That's the Ragdoll song that I listen to and I go, yeah, I think we actually did something really, really cool with that one. The way it's structured, the way the first verse and second verse are very different to one another, the way the chorus kind of chunks along. There's the modal interchange happening on the guitar solo, and there is the real epic ending on there, and just the stuff that Cam and Ryan play on that always blows my mind. In terms of solos, There's two that come to mind. One is the solo from the song Self-Censored, and I've told the story about this one before where we were tracking it and starting to rain outside and Troy's like, right, you're going to run around the block, just exhaust yourself, come in, I'm going to hand you the guitar, it's going to be tuned and ready to go, and you're just going to do it. You're going to play the solo. And I did. That's the one that made it to tape. I think that's a really cool little studio story. The other one is the solo from Rust, like I said earlier. That's two. I really like the solo that I played in Sky's Limit as well. Again, that one's just got a lot of funky notes and cool, just raw rock and roll stuff. I think the solo in The Last Time is another one that I really like as well. And that one's kind of hard to replicate. I like all of the solos, unless I'm not warmed up and I have to play them, which is basically the start of every gig. So yeah, there's a lot. In fact, I'd kind of like to hear from the people who've taken the time to go and listen to Ragdoll. Let me know what your favorite solos, songs, and riffs are. We're getting on the home stretch now, so I'll answer a few more. This one comes from Wolf's Den's Music. Great YouTube channel if you want to check out some awesome rock and synthwave backing tracks. And Wolf's Den is an avid contributor to the Discord. What an absolute legend. Desert Island piece of rack gear. I can only choose one piece of vintage rack gear. And what's it going to be? Is it going to be the 2290, the PCM 70, the SPX 90? Look, I think it has to be the H3000. That one is just the pinnacle for me, the way it has such an identifiable sound. It's one of those things where you just connect it in the signal chain and kind of makes everything sound a little bit better, whether it's the really thick micro pitch, whether it's the experimental effects like the crystallizers and the pitch shifters, whether it's just the delays in there or the way you can create your own effect algorithms in there using the factory presets, Mod Factory 1 and 2, the way it looks, the way it was used on so many of my favorite albums. That would have to be the one. But the 2290 is like just behind it because such a beautiful sounding delay. You can make great delay, chorus, doubling effects out of it. It looks like something out of Blade Runner. It's so meticulously put together. It's a beautiful thing. So yeah, I think today I would say the H3000. Maybe tomorrow I would say the 2290. And on that note, are we going to see more rack videos in the future? Absolutely. I've actually been meaning to do my favorite rack gear of all time and then affordable alternatives to those favorite pieces video for a long time. So I've kind of got everything in the rack at the moment. I just need to sit down and film that one. And you can probably guess what's going to be in that video when it comes to the favorite pieces. But I do want to make sure I can do some comparisons between like, hey, here's the unobtainium, absolutely awesome thing that I'm lucky enough to have and something that's widely available that you could go and buy for not too much money and actually get a very, very comparable tone. Have I had a listen to Mindcrime III? And if so, what are my thoughts on it? I have. It's okay. It's kind of Queensryche fan fiction to me, though. I wasn't that into Mindcrime II. I just kind of feel like Operation Mindcrime, it's a little bit like the original Star Wars trilogy. I just don't think about the prequels and the sequels, and yes, they exist, and yes, there's an extended lore around it, but, you know, sometimes things are just perfect the way that they are. So, yeah, I would say if you're a fan of Queensryche and Jeff Tate, go and have a listen to it. It certainly has its moments, but it just makes me want to go back and listen to the original Mindcrime even more than ever. And in fact, I think after this, I'm going to listen to Operation Mindcrime. And then to finish up, what about some guitar improvisation tips as well as my guitar routine? My guitar routine nowadays is more about just sitting down and doing it. If I'm preparing for a show or a tour, get the songs up, play through them, make sure I'm happy with the way I can play them, and kind of make sure I can play them 10 to 20% faster than I would in the studio, because there's the adrenaline rush live, there's the added pressure of not being at home in a comfortable environment. You need that little bit of headroom on your practice there. So I just really focus on that. And if it's something else where maybe I'm consistently unhappy with something that I'm playing, I want to work on my legato technique or my picking, I'll sit down and I'll hammer that for a couple of days in a row to the point where I feel like it serves me musically. Outside of that, just being here in the studio keeps me more than busy enough. It makes me play a lot. And I think guitar is one of those things, music in general, where it is its own reward. You should just do it because you're doing it. And there's so much, sort of performative. What did I read the other day? Someone talked about it when you see all these, health and wellness influencers talking about trying to, I need this much sleep and I need to do this many reps in the gym. And if I don't do that, then, my whole life will fall apart. The way I think about my guitar playing and my practice routine is I want to be anti-fragile. I don't want things outside of my control to affect me any more than they have to. So I want to make sure that I know the tunes and I'm comfortable with my technique, that I'm ready to go and enjoy myself when I do a session or I play live, and really focus on those things rather than thinking about, what if I make a mistake? What if I'm not good enough to do this? What if I look stupid or I make a bunch of weird guitar faces? That's going to happen anyway, right? What if it's a little bit too cold outside and I can't hit my optimum guitar max speed? Don't worry about that stuff. Just sit down and get it done. In terms of improv tips, I think two things that will help anybody become a better improviser. One, being able to sing what you play. And if you are coherent enough to have watched this video, there's a good chance that you can speak a language natively. And that language in itself probably contains a lot of, evolutionary traits that derive from when your language was a little bit more tonal and is related to singing. There's this idea that human language evolved from vocalizations and singing. So being able to sing what you play without a guitar in your hand, I'm sure you can just kind of sit there and hum a bunch of little melodies and do that. That is one thing to practice and cultivate and be able to transfer onto the guitar. So sit there and just hum a major scale while you play it. And then, if you're playing some pentatonic blues licks, try and scat along with them. Even if it sounds terrible, it's more about building up that relationship in your brain between the singability, the playability, and the actual musicality of it. The other thing is working on rhythms, whether it's just sitting down and tapping out a rhythm, whether it's playing a drum kit or some bongos or a cajon. Working on your rhythmic phrasing will make everything so much better. And being able to improvise rhythms and then being able to sing melodies and then have them come out of the guitar in real time, I feel like that will ultimately help you unlock your guitar playing, because you're focusing on musicality. That's what we want when we improvise. We want to improvise music, not just a bunch of guitar noises and exercises. So work on that. Sing what you play and work on your rhythmic phrasing. Everything else in music is downstream from that, in my opinion. That is it for today's Q&A. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, if you want to support what I'm doing on the channel, links to the Patreon and the music that I make in the video description. If you've got questions for the next Q&A, pop them in the comments section below, but go and grab your guitars and make some glorious guitar music for the rest of the day. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time. We're all waiting.